Research data archiving is the long-term storage of scholarly research data, including the natural sciences, social sciences, and life sciences. The various academic journals have differing policies regarding how much of their data and methods researchers are required to store in a public archive, and what is actually archived varies widely between different disciplines. Similarly, the major grant-giving institutions have varying attitudes towards public archival of data. In general, the tradition of science has been for publications to contain sufficient information to allow fellow researchers to replicate and therefore test the research. In recent years, this approach has become increasingly strained as research in some areas depends on large data sets which cannot easily be replicated independently. Data archiving is more important in some fields than others. In a few fields, all of the data necessary to replicate the work is already available in the journal article. In drug development, a great deal of data is generated and must be archived so researchers can verify that the reports the drug companies publish accurately reflect the data. The requirement of data archiving is a recent development in the history of science. It was made possible by advances in information technology allowing large amounts of data to be stored and accessed from central locations. For example, the American Geophysical Union adopted the first policy on data archiving in 1993, about 3 years after the beginning of the WWW. This policy mandates that data sets cited in AGU papers must be archived by a recognized data center. It permits the creation of data papers, and it establishes AGU's role in maintaining data archives. But it makes no requirements on paper authors to archive their data. Prior to organized data archiving, researchers wanting to evaluate or replicate a paper would have to request data and methods information from the author. The academic community expects authors to share supplemental data. This process was recognized as wasteful of time and energy and obtained mixed results. Information could become lost or corrupted over the years. In some cases, authors simply refuse to provide the information. The need for data archiving and due diligence is greatly increased when the research deals with health issues of public policy formation. Selected policies by journals. The American Naturalist requires authors to deposit the data associated with accepted papers in a public archive. For gene sequence data and phylogenetic trees, deposition in GenBank or Treebase, respectively, is required. There are many possible archives that may suit a particular data set, including the Dryad repository for ecological and evolutionary biology data. All accession numbers for GenBank, Treebase, and Dryad must be included in accepted manuscripts before they go to production. If the data is deposited somewhere else, please provide a link. If the data is culled from published literature, please deposit the collated data in Dryad for the convenience of your readers. Any impediments to data sharing should be brought to the attention of the editors at the time of submission so that appropriate arrangements can be worked out. Journal of Heredity. The primary data underlying the conclusions of an article are critical to the verifiability and transparency of the scientific enterprise, and should be preserved in usable form for decades in the future. For this reason, Journal of Heredity requires that newly reported nucleotide or amino acid sequences and structural coordinates be submitted to appropriate public databases. Accession numbers must be included in the final version of the manuscript. For other forms of data, the journal endorses the principles of the Joint Data Archiving Policy in encouraging all authors to archive primary datasets in an appropriate public archive, such as Dryad, Treebase, or the Knowledge Network for Biocomplexity. Authors are encouraged to make data publicly available at time of publication or, if the technology of the archive allows, opt to embargo access to the data for a period up to a year after publication. The American Genetic Association also recognizes the vast investment of individual researchers in generating and curating large datasets. Consequently, we recommend that this investment be respected in secondary analyses and meta-analyses in a gracious collaborative spirit. Molecular ecology expects that data supporting the results in the paper should be archived in an appropriate public archive, such as GenBank, Gene Expression Omnibus, Treebase, Dryad, the Knowledge Network for Biocomplexity, your own institutional funder repository, or as supporting information on the Molecular Ecology website. Data are important products of the scientific enterprise, and they should be preserved and usable for decades in the future. Authors may elect to have the data publicly available at time of publication, or, if the technology of the archive allows, may opt to embargo access to the data for a period up to a year after publication. Exceptions may be granted at the discretion of the editor, especially for sensitive information such as human subject data or the location of endangered species. Nature. Such material must be hosted on an accredited independent site, or sent to the Nature journal at submission, either uploaded via the journal's online submission service, or if the files are too large or in an unsuitable format for this purpose, on CD, DVD. Such material cannot solely be hosted on an author's personal or institutional website. Nature requires the reviewer to determine if all of the supplementary data and methods have been archived. The policy advises reviewers to consider several questions, including, should the authors be asked to provide supplementary methods or data to accompany the paper online? Science supports the efforts of databases that aggregate published data for the use of the scientific community. Therefore, before publication, large data sets must be deposited in an approved database and an accession number provided for inclusion in the published paper. Materials and methods. Science now requests that, in general, authors place the bulk of the description of materials and methods online as supporting material, providing only as much methods description in the print manuscript as is necessary to follow the logic of the text. Royal Society Publishing. As a condition of acceptance, authors agree to honor any reasonable request by other researchers for materials, methods, or data necessary to verify the conclusion of the article. Supplementary data up to 10 megabits is placed on the Society's website free of charge and is publicly accessible. Large datasets must be deposited in a recognized public domain database by the author prior to submission. The accession number should be provided for inclusion in the published article. Policies by funding agencies. In the United States, the National Science Foundation has tightened requirements on data archiving. Researchers seeking funding from NSF are now required to file a data management plan as a two-page supplement to the grant application. The NSF DataNet initiative has resulted in funding of the Data Observation Network for Earth project, which will provide scientific data archiving for ecological and environmental data produced by scientists worldwide. DataOne's stated goal is to preserve and provide access to multi-scale, multidiscipline, and multinational data. The community of users for DataOne includes scientists, ecosystem managers, policymakers, students, educators, and the public. Data archives. Natural sciences. The following list refers to scientific data archives. CISL Research Data Archive, Dryad, ESO, SAIN-TCF Science Archive Facility, International Tree Ring Data Bank, Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research, Knowledge Network for Biocomplexity, National Archive of Computerized Data on Aging. National Archive of Criminal Justice Data, National Climatic Data Center, National Geophysical Data Center, National Snow and Ice Data Center, National Oceanographic Data Center, Oak Ridge National Laboratory Distributed Active Archive Center, Pangea, Data Publisher for Earth and AMP, Environmental Science, World Data Center, DataOne. Social Sciences Data Archives are professional institutions for the acquisition, preparation, preservation, and dissemination of social and behavioral data. The term is also sometimes used about natural science institutions, but here seems data centers to be the most used term. Data archives in the social sciences evolved in the 1950s and has been perceived as an international movement. By 1964, the International Social Science Council had sponsored a second conference on social science data archives and had a standing committee on social science data, both of which stimulated the data archives movement. By the beginning of the 21st century, most developed countries and some developing countries had organized formal and well-functioning national data archives. In addition, college and university campuses often have backward data libraries that make data available to the faculty, staff, and students. Most of these bear minimal archival responsibility, relying for that function on a national institution. Re3Data.org is a global registry of research data repository indexing data archives from all disciplines. http://www.re3data.org. CESSDA members are data archives and other organizations that archive social science data and provide data for secondary use. http://www.sciences.The.net. About members. HTML. Consortium of European Social Science Data Archives. http://www.sciences.The.org. The Danish Data Archives. http://www.sciences.The. Content us about _us specific page. http://www.sciences.The. default. HTM Inter-University Consortium for Political and Social Research. http://www.icpsr. Umich. Edu. The Roper Center for Public Opinion Research. http://www.ropercenter. Yukon. Edu. The Social Science Data Archive. http://data archives. SS. UCLA. Edu. The NCAR Research Data Archive. http://rda. UCAR. Edu.